Man, I'm doing good, man. I figured I'd open it up with just a barrage of questions.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
Craig says, I got a question. Carriker versus VJ, inflated knocker ball. Who wins?
I don't know what that is, but I'm always going to bet on myself.
Well, there you go.
Well, how much you weighing these days, big fella? Where you weighing in at?
270 on the dot this morning. Actually, I was a fat, out-of-shape slob since last March. I decided to make a New Year's resolution and actually keep it for a change. And actually, full disclosure, I was down to 265 last week. So at one point, I went from 295 on January 2nd to 265 last week, knowing as soon as I started to eat a little normal, I'd immediately be back up to 270, which is where I want to be. But I essentially lost 30 pounds at one point, so since the new year.
Wow. How you moving, though? You feeling pretty good leg-wise? I mean, you moving around all right?
I still need a surgery in my left knee, but I've needed torn meniscus, bone spurs. I've had that for about 9 years. I'm finally just going to get that surgery this summer, but to answer your question directly, it's actually the best I've felt since I was about 27.
Hey, like Stone Cold, baby. He can't feel anything. I can't feel my face. Okay, so
that's about right.
He says, then I love to see Terrell sneak out of the corner and blast a black shirt bomb. That's messed up, Craig. You want them to double team me?
Get him with the steel chair.
Okay, so Adam, a lot of stuff, a lot of things happening, a lot of developments happening. I was want to ask you about the Carriker live show that you did with the Omaha World Herald, because I know you're not with them anymore. I want to just kind of get a history lesson of how you started that. How did that come about?
I'll make a long story short. So years ago when Pelini was fired, obviously there was a ginormous reaction, and I was in D.C. at the time, and I noticed that a lot of the former players who were speaking out pretty much had the same opinion. And I pretty much had the exact opposite opinion. And so I just took to Facebook one day, not thinking anybody would hardly ever see it. Like, I think we literally just started the Facebook page. And so there weren't too many followers of it. And so I just sat down, typed out this long blurb. I didn't spell check. I didn't reread it. I didn't use paragraphs, and I just hit post. And then I went on about my day, and I didn't think much of it. Long story short, I started getting blown up from former players. The Omaha World Herald contacts me. Hey, can we use this? So it got a reaction. People were clearly interested. And Mike Riley gets hired. Nobody knows who Mike Riley is. I went to Oregon State's football camp 4 straight years in high school. So I wrote a thing about Mike Riley. And then long story short, I was trying to gauge if there was legit interest or if it was just hot button topics that I happened to touch on. So Mike Riley's first year, I wrote articles every Sunday night, once a week. Those did pretty well. Then Husker Max approached me about doing videos. They said, for every $1 you can make writing an article, you can make 6 doing videos. I thought that was great since I wasn't making any money doing the articles anyways. So I went with Husker Max for a year. Then the Herald picked me up. I was there for whatever that is, 6-7 years. And now we've parted ways. And I got to be honest, it's been a long time since I've been this. I've always been excited. It's been a long time since I've burying the Herald. I'm just excited about the future.
Oh, absolutely, man. I think it's so many things. There's so many ways that you can go, especially now in this the market that we live in now. It's just so much stuff that you can do. If not by yourself, you are a guy that people want to hear from. How many games does Nebraska football win, Scaper asked?
Oh man, next year you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Shoot. Well, the schedule, although we said this last year, and it was true, isn't exactly, a slobber knocker, if you will. If we get to 6, that's all I care about. But if you look at the schedule and you look at what we can do, I can see 8. So I'll just go in the middle with 7.
That's kind of interesting, Adam, because when you talk to a lot of people, and you've been in the locker rooms before. And we kind of seen it with Husker basketball now, getting to 500, what a big deal it is, kind of taking over the city. But, just talking to like some coaches and players, it's always kind of hard to wrap your mind around, within a locker room, your goal being 500 to get to 500. How do you kind of feel about that? I mean, obviously, it's not a goal, but sometimes when you're, come from a position like Nebraska basketball, you have to acknowledge that's moving a step forward in your program.
So I'll be real, and I'll call myself out on this. So going back to that article I wrote after Pelini got fired, one of the things that drove me nuts, and you got to keep in mind, this was like 8-9 years ago. It was a different time. A lot of the former players who were voicing an opinion were like, we got to 9 wins, and you should be happy with 9 wins. And at the time, all I could see was, 4,000 yards being given up rushing-wise in the snow to Wisconsin in 3 quarters. And all I could see was all the Saturday night tough things that were there to watch. And I was part of some of my own, unfortunately. But it was one of those things where at the time I was like, 9 wins, it ain't the bar. That's the minimum expectation. And at the time it was like, I don't want to accept this. We want to get better. Well, times have changed. And I'll call myself out because 8-9 years later, the bar is different. The bar is we just want to get to a freaking bowl game so everybody can skip out on it and no players can play it. And we can sit at home and watch a bunch of guys that won't play till next year play because that's how bowl games are. And that's where Husker football is, unfortunately. We're just trying to get to a bowl. It doesn't mean anything, but it will mean something to us because we ain't been to one in about, 6-7 years. So it's unfortunate, but you can't just be stuck in what we used to be or what we want to be. You got to be stuck, whether you like it or not, with what is. And we ain't been to a bowl game in a long time. So I've always talked about the staircase of success. And VJack, good Lord, he won 3 national titles. He understands this better than anyone. But you got to climb the staircase of success one step at a time. It's not very often you're going to go from 3 wins and all the way jump up to 10 or 11. So we got to start by beating the teams we should beat. Stop losing the teams we shouldn't be losing to. Okay, and then you start beating some of the pretty good teams, and you're competitive with the really good teams, and then all of a sudden you eke out a win over Ohio State and Michigan as the years goes along, and you can start to build back up. But we got to start by just getting six wins, and then we can start talking about 8, 9, 10, or whatever beyond that. I hesitated to say 7. I only say 7 because the schedule is soft, but I'll just be excited to see 6 at some point.
Dang. I was thinking at least 8. I need 8 wins. Listen, did you see the guys out there on the snow field?
Hey man, I love off-season national championships, but it's got to carry over into more regular season wins first. And I'm the first guy that's going to be hooping and hollering the first time we get to 9 wins. The thing I just talked about not being good enough 8-9 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's why I said I'll call myself out. But, man, we got to get there first. The moment we get there, then I'll start talking about more. I'm with you, man, but I got to see it, man.
Hey, do you think – have you been watching some of the clips and stuff of the guys working out?
Oh, yeah, I have. I love it.
It just looks different, right? It looks different. When I seen little Coach Rule run over there and belly flop somebody, man, I was like, what in the world?
Because every off season, they post videos like this or some sort of workout videos, and it gets people hyped up. And I understand all that. And I've talked about this in the past, and the former coach is well aware of it. So it ain't like if he hears this, he's going to be shocked. But I hated some of the videos that were put out in the past because I'd watch guys squat with like 7, 8, 45-pound weights on each side and be like 600-700 pounds, and they'd go down like 4 inches. I hated that. To me, it wasn't real. When I watch the videos that are going out now, it seems more real. It seems more legit. I'd rather watch a guy go to 90 degrees on a squat with 405 on it. To me, that's more impressive. And I know that's not what the videos are. I think the only reason people have cause to pause or reason to hesitate is because we've seen it before. Not exactly like this. Mm. And I will readily say, the more I learn about Matt Rule, the more I like the guy. I think he's a good coach. Whether he's great or not, we'll find out. But I think that's the only thing that gives people cause to pause is because we've seen similar stuff before. Although I got to admit, it's hard for me not to buy in. It's hard because I do like what I'm seeing.
Listen, Chase B, I'm bought in to this thing because I'm seeing things that I haven't seen in years with a Z, not an S. Okay, so I'm not. Listen, I ain't giving Nebraska football 1 win. Not 1. I'm not going to predict and say, I would hope that they would want to win them all. Their football team, they play within 1 score of just about anybody. We've got more NIL money than just about anybody. We're getting guys. When you look at the Nebraska, since we talking about Nebraska football, when you look at what we've done in the offseason up until now. How good of a job do you think he's done? Matt Rule.
I think he's done a great job. When you look at the short amount of time they had to recruit, I think they did a great job with what they've done there. I think he's, I say this looking towards the future, not trying to bury the past, but I'm still going to say it. I think he's actually building a culture and not just talking about it. And I think he lives it and he breathes it and it means it something to him. And when he talks about busting his rear end and working hard and outworking people, like he's actually doing it. And I love that. And I think that's what's going to reverberate throughout the locker room, rather than potentially a coach, whether it be here or somewhere else, who just talks about it but doesn't do it. Guys aren't going to buy in. So I love what I'm seeing because it feels authentic and real and legit. And that's the first time I've been able to say that in a while, and that excites me.
When do you expect the most attrition to happen from the team as far as, guys leaving? You got to get down to 85 scholarships. When do you think that's going to happen? Sooner or later?
After spring ball.
It'll be a mass
and
exodus.
It may happen throughout the course of the season, too, as the season is unfolding. But I think the first time we'll see mass attrition is after spring ball.
Gus Mohawk says, is Carriker going to Colorado?
The game? I might. I haven't decided yet. I very well might.
Come on, Carriker, you're in Colorado. How did we miss that?
Because I have 84 children and 4,000 youth sporting events, and I'm rounding down when I give those numbers. I always, like any team that I coach, they know if there's a conflict, I have to watch the Nebraska game. But there's a difference between watching it and driving to it and doing the all-day game day experience, which is awesome.
True.
But I'd rather be at my kids' sporting events if possible. I'm going to watch the game, but going to it sometimes creates a lot more challenges for me.
No, you're exactly right. I forgot you had a whole basketball team with the kids over there and a couple of backups.
I was going to say players too.
Also, what's the hardest environment to play in college football, and what's the hardest environment to play in the league?
So for me, I love rowdy crowds. So the louder it is in an away game, the more I like it. The crowd doesn't bother me. In fact, the quieter it is, unless we're kicking their butts, then the silence can be deafening. For me, it was Texas A&M, and I'll tell you why. So when we played at A&M, the first series of the game, so they have like their cheer practice and all that stuff the night before, but like in the stands, the fans like move back and forth. I don't know how to explain it, but they move back and forth. And anytime I would look up, it would like make me dizzy the way that they were moving. I don't know if my head was off. I didn't sleep good that day, but like I could not look. So game in between snaps, I'm staring at the ground the entire game. The only time I would look up is when the ball's being snapped. But on the sidelines, coaches are talking to us. I'm staring at the ground because anytime I would look up, I would get nauseous. And so it was the only time I've ever had that happen to me. And it was, I don't know, the way they were moving in the stands, what the fans were doing. So that was a weird, unique experience for me. In the league, so I've got asthma. I would say the altitude of Denver was the most difficult for me just because of my asthma. And so I always hated hot games. I always looked on the schedule for hot games, especially being a big guy, and, where we playing in Colorado or at Denver, because that altitude would get to me.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine living in Colorado. That air's so thin, man. It's got to get. What's the temperature right now?
Oh, it's not 40. It ain't bad.
Oh, okay. We got 50 coming here, so we're a little luckier than you are right now. Okay, I got a couple more questions for you. What are you doing what do you talk about in the off season when there's no football going on?
Well, first of all, there's always football going on. Okay. Number two, once I kind of figure out what I'm doing and I'm starting to get a pretty good idea, but my plan is to do at least 2 shows a week when I start firing that bad boy up again. And I like to do 1 interview a week, and then there's always something to talk about. So I ended up taking a mini last summer, June and July, before August started. But before June started, and I decided to end up taking that break, before June started, I sat down and I just wrote a list of ideas for shows. And there was exactly 31 ideas that I had for shows that I thought were good ideas. I've never used any of them because I ended up taking the summer off. Like, there's never a shortage, whether it be stories, whether it be just stuff to talk about, in my opinion, for content. So for me, there's always something to talk about. There's always interviews to be had. Like right now, I'll tell you, I've got an Amon Green interview in the bank. I know you have interviewed Amon. I got Eric Crouch in the bank. So I got those things kind of stored up a little bit, you know. And for me, it's interesting because sometimes, you know, I got family members, you know, because they've got their wonderful opinions. And they're like, why don't you talk about more sports and volleyball and baseball? Well, I grew up playing way more baseball than any other sport. My daughter wants to play volleyball at Nebraska. Like, I love all these sports, respect them. But I'll be honest with you, when I put out an off-season football show, unless it's like volleyball in the Final Four or basketball doing well or baseball in the Big Ten championships, like an off-season football show 9 times out of 10 will get more interaction than most other sports will. And that's not my preference. That's just what the stats and numbers and facts tell me. It's also my wheelhouse, so it's easier for me to talk about. But that's just kind of what I roll with in the off season.
What's the next chapter for Adam?
You know, I'll let the cat out of the bag a smidgen here, not a lot. I'm incredibly grateful for the responses I've gotten since I kind of announced I'm not with the Herald. Again, wish them nothing but the absolute best. You know, it's very cool. Some of the professional responses I've gotten as well, with interest there. Obviously, the fan response. I don't call it the People's Show for nothing. There's some folks who've reached out to me about potentially doing a Big Ten type show. Well, it's not a Big Ten type show. It is a Big Ten show talking about Big Ten sports and football. You know, radio stations, maybe the one I'm talking on right now, might have some interest.
Dun, 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 dun.
Some other outlets throughout the state of Nebraska might have some interest. And some folks from Sports Illustrated that run the Nebraska department of Sports Illustrated have reached out. So I'm probably going to be putting out some content for them as well. And what's cool is nobody's asked for exclusivity so far, which is good, because I'd prefer not to do that, because I'd prefer to, you know, keep the options open as much as possible and form as many good relationships as I can. As long as people are interested, and thankfully they seem to be, I love doing what I'm doing. So I'm excited for the next chapter.